Hey everybody, I am so glad you are joining me, whether it's live or later. Welcome. This is my first LinkedIn live stream, so I'm kind of learning this along with anybody else who's doing this for the first time. So again, welcome one more time. As people are joining now, or if you are watching later, I thought I would just start with an introduction here. This is a brand new 10-week series about how the narrative is changing for classical music, for the performing arts more broadly. And I would say over the past 5.5 years or so that I've been creating content, this is a big shift. So here we are with this series. It's good news. We're going to get into it as we're getting going, as people are joining. The idea is that with the narrative changing, I'm seeing this from multiple angles, multiple ways. The first is calls I get from recruiters as different search firms are reaching out for jobs they're recruiting me for, sending me different CEO job descriptions. I'm seeing a difference in the literal words people are using when they're looking for their chief executive over 2 years ago, even 3 years, 4 years ago. So that right there is massive. That means our board members are also changing what they're looking for in the way we're running and governing our institutions. I hear this from board members directly who reach out to me. I hear this from potential clients, which is all kinds of different staff members, board members, senior leadership teams. So all this is to say, again, over the past 5.5 years that I've been creating content, first as a blogger, more recently in more video content, so many of the ideas we're going to talk about over these 10 weeks used to be sort of on the fringes, sort of on the outside, and really have moved to the forefront. So for anybody who's been following me, whether that's you're a new follower or you've been with me all this time, this is good news, great news for our industry, and such a positive way to start 2022, even though we know we're in the thick of it still with so many challenges. So progress, not perfection, and this is definitely progress. If I have not met you yet, hi, my name is Aubrey Bergauer, and most people, just by a quick way of introduction, most people know me from my work at the California Symphony. I was executive director there for 5 years, 2014 through 2019. During that time, the TLDR is we doubled our audience, nearly quadrupled our donor base, and so many of the ideas I've been creating content around over these years is in response to the work we were doing there and really trying to share the how-to, the results, everything that we were doing and testing and achieving. So before that, I was in Seattle for about a decade at the major institutions, cut my teeth at Seattle Symphony, at the Seattle Opera, and the Bumbershoot Music and Arts Festival. And fast forward to today, the last 2.5 years now, I have been working with other organizations. The side hustle became the main hustle, as they say, right? And I've been consulting with organizations of all different sizes, artistic disciplines. I've now worked with over 50 clients in the last 2.5 years from literally around the world. Orchestras, opera companies, chamber music, dance organizations, music schools, festivals, across all kinds of budget sizes, all the way up to $300 million. So all this is to say, no matter where you fall on that spectrum, I love this elevated view of the field that I've been able to gain over the last 2.5 years. I'm really grateful for that. I'm very gratified by making an impact beyond one organization. And it's just allowed me to see things in a different way. And I get to interact with all of you along the way. So why we're doing this, one more time as we get going, this is part of the LinkedIn Creator Accelerator Program. So a huge thank you to LinkedIn for making this possible. If you have not heard of the LinkedIn Creator Accelerator Program, that's because it just started. This is the first year of it. And I want to say thank you and shout out Karen Basilar, who is the one who encouraged me to apply. Karen was on my team. I hired her at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music, and I hired her in as a content strategist. And back in September of last year, she said, Aubrey, sent me the information. You got to apply for this. And So I did, looked into this new program LinkedIn was launching, and sure enough, in November, I learned that I was one of 100 creators accepted out of the thousands who had applied. And the point in me sharing all of this is to say that this means it's not just an honor, but it means that LinkedIn is making an investment in this content, an investment in the business side of arts and culture. And they believe in this work. They believe in the movement we are creating. They believe in the change for the performing arts and culture more broadly. And I'm just so grateful for that. So thank you to LinkedIn. Thank you to Jeremy Clayton. He's my specific creator manager I'm working with there. So, so far, it's just been a really awesome experience, and we're just getting started. So, okay, here we go. Our time today, we're going to spend the next 15 or 20 minutes or so. We'll be totally done in half an hour for every one of these live events I'm doing over the next 10 weeks. So today, the next 15 or 20 minutes is going to be spent on a real high level overview of what the next 9 weeks entails. So that means I'm going to run down the 9 facets of our industry that I do see the narrative changing, some changing more than others. So we'll touch on that today too. And it's all for the good, though, which is the point. Progress, not perfection, again, right? So if you are watching this, please share this with your friends, share this on your feeds if you like what you're hearing, if you think other people in your network would benefit from this content. That would be really helpful to me. It'd be really helpful to spreading the word about this work, and helpful to really getting more people on board with the idea that the narrative can change, that it is possible for our industry. All right, enough introduction. Let's talk about this. 9 trends that are changing for the better for our industry. I'm going to spend about a minute or so on each one of these to give you the overview. If you are watching, comment along the way if you would. It's helpful first to me as I'm figuring out this platform. As I said, LinkedIn Live is a new platform for me, so it's kind of helpful to see how that's going for you. If you leave comments, it's, I think, just more fun in general when anybody on a live call, stream, Zoom, whatever, is more interactive. So would love to hear from you. Would love for you guys to meet each other as well. Okay, number 1 of 9 areas that are changing for the better: customer experience. Anybody who follows me for probably any amount of time knows that this is one of the things I've championed the most. It is also what I've become known for, because it's one of the things I've been beating the drum on the longest. All right, music pun, beating the drum. When I started blogging, it was the summer of 2016, and that is when the California Symphony did the Orchestra X project, which I later learned, I didn't even know at the time, but I later learned that's user experience research. And the post of our findings on that went viral in October 2016. It is one of the top 2 blog posts I've ever written. It still gets tons of hits to this day, which means this idea of customer experience, user experience, researching, designing to solve for what our audience needs and wants, that is still relevant and continues to be relevant and continues to grow in relevancy. So what I hear today is that most organizations are using words like centering their community or centering the customer. And to me, that's what this means. It means shifting so that our customer is at the center of our work. The customer is who we are serving, because as we know, without a customer, that means both audience member and customer and sense of donor. Without a customer, we ain't got a business. We ain't got an organization, right? So centering that customer is so important to the work we do and to our relevancy. All of that, the customer experience, is tangential to the performance. That's another thing, if you've been following me for any amount of time, you've probably heard me say before. And I think still as an industry, we probably over-focus on repertoire as a solution. It's not that it shouldn't be a part of the conversation, but the point in all of this is that that shift is starting. So we're going to talk about that next week. I am bringing in a guest. Ruth Hart is from the Harvard Clayton Christensen Institute. She is an expert on a framework called Jobs to be Done theory that really matches everything I'm laying out here about customer experience, solving for the customer. So she's going to join me next week and really just be a wealth of information as we get into customer experience more. Okay, number 2. area of our industry that the narrative is changing for the better is customer retention. Now, maybe you're hearing me say this and you're thinking, Aubrey, how is there customer retention when we are literally going through the third wave of this virus? We are canceling performances. We are trying to get our audiences back still. Our subscriber numbers are not what they were. I get it. If you're saying that, I get it. I hear you. Here's why this is changing for the better. Because one, it's more urgent than ever before because of all those things I just said. And two, think about these words that people are using. We're talking about comparing our ticket sales to pre-pandemic numbers. We're talking about specifically our subscriber levels compared to pre-pandemic levels. How do we get our audiences back to pre-pandemic levels? All of those words, phrases are ways to say we care about retention. We want our patrons back. That is a massive shift in how we talk about our audiences, and it is a shift for the better because it used to be pre-pandemic, almost everyone talking about acquisition. How do we get new audiences? How do we get younger audiences? And again, if you've been following me for some amount of time, you probably heard me say, I think that's the wrong goal. The better goal, it's not that we don't need or want new audiences, but the better goal is that we have got to get stronger at retaining the ones we currently have. So the shift in conversation, the shift in dialogue on patron retention is huge, and it's for the better. It is a change in our narrative for the good. Number 3, company culture. I wrote a blog post in 2017, and at the top, I quoted from Capacity Interactive. If you don't follow them, you should. They're a wonderful arts marketing firm. I quoted Ashley Dunn-Gatterdam there, and she had said, this was earlier in 2017 on their podcast, so total plug for their podcast. It's great. She had said, quote, I don't think I've ever worked with a nonprofit that had a single conversation that involved the words company culture and defining that. Now, again, that was 2017. Fast forward to today, early 2022, we do talk about company culture. We don't have it nailed. We don't have it figured out. But whereas in 2017, she was saying those words were not even in our vernacular for the most part, they are now. Shift for the better. For sure. So we now as organizations talk more, progress, not perfection, but talk more about what are our values? Who do we want to be? How do we want our organization to navigate and operate in this world? Again, not part of the vernacular in 2017, is part of the vernacular now for sure. So company culture, I think, is so critical. We will talk about it. We will talk about psychological safety. Spoiler alert, psychological safety is the #1 quality of high-performing teams. I'm obsessed with this. And it doesn't mean we don't give constructive feedback. It means encouragement is statistically proven as a better way to guide and change performance in the positive direction. Research bears that out. Anyways, I could go on, but I'll save it for our week on company culture. And we're also going to put into that week a little bit of remote work. Obviously, that is something that's changing. How do we balance that? Because we do give in-person performances. We do have in-person live experiences. So clearly we have to be on site sometimes, but maybe not 100% of the time is required anymore. So remote work and what that looks like for our industry, we're going to hit that on week 3 as well. Number 4 of 9, representation. Many of you probably saw this about a week or so ago. I put out on LinkedIn a poll, and that poll was asking, what trends do you think have changed the most over the last year, 2 years or so? And the #1 answer in response to that poll was representation. And that was 42% of all of the votes, all of the participants and respondents in the poll said that. And this means we're talking about representation on stage, on our staffs, on our boards. And as we know, I mean, I agree with you, all of you who responded that way. This is a massive, massive shift that's happened in our industry, a change for the better, for sure. The way this topic has come to the forefront is so overdue, so necessary, and it is happening before our eyes. And we are seeing changes specifically in our top senior leadership levels. We're seeing it at all levels of the organization, I would say, but the fact that we are seeing it in top leadership levels, I should say, is a real momentous and so needed shift. So we're going to talk about more about representation in week 4. We are also going to talk about hiring best practices, because that goes hand in hand, more equitable hiring. And this is an issue I've become very passionate about over the years as I've learned from my own mistakes, my own biases. We all have biases, all of us. So how do we combat that so that we are hiring the best, most qualified people across the entire range of talent available to us? Again, on stage, off stage, bringing them into our boardrooms as well. Week 5, 5 of 9, 5 of 9 trends changing for the better for arts and culture, classical music, the subscription model, and the subscription economy. Okay, we talked about retention just a few moments ago. What's interesting to me about the subscription economy is that, and the subscription model, is that the subscription model is failing. I don't mean to be too dramatic about it, but struggling, maybe if we want to be less dramatic, struggling in our industry, struggling inside the arts. Subscriptions have been on the decline for years. This is just fact. And yet the subscription model is thriving in other industries. Thriving. Some people have probably heard me say, if you followed me on podcasts or listened to me recently, I talk about this sometimes. I mean, everything's on subscription these days, right? It's Netflix, it's Amazon. It's also, though, I mean, Dollar Shave Club, it's Stitch Fix. My dog's bougie dog food gets sent to my door every 2 weeks on subscription, right? Like, it's just so thriving, and the subscription economy is so prevalent now. So why we're talking about this is that it is changing, even though we have not had our subscription numbers rebound to where they were pre-pandemic. The conversation around it is changing. And so what I mean by that, it is organizations used to be, I would say pre-2020, incalcitrant in talking about this. Incalcitrant. I mean, the biggest change was, should we offer choose your own subscriptions over fixed seat 18-week packages, right? So completely inflexible. Now, though, everything's on the table. So again, a big shift in the conversation, a big change for the better, more flexible offerings. Again, serving that customer. This is what our customers have been telling us per studies in the field for a long time now. So on this week 5, we are going to talk about 4 specific reasons why the subscription model is different for the arts than it is in other industries. And we're going to break that down and what we can do to change it so that we do see the thriving subscription economy that everyone else is enjoying. So I'm working on a great guest to join us that week. Number 6, fundraising. Who wants to raise more money? All of us, right? So we know we cannot keep relying on the big donors at the top of the donor pyramid. We know this. Now, I would say this is in the category of, we've said this for a while now, for years, and yet now a couple things. One, more organizations are saying this than before, for sure. Almost everybody's saying we cannot continue to over rely on a few major donors at the top of the pyramid. Do we love those donors? Oh yeah, 100%. Am I always going to solicit big gifts personally for the rest of my life? Probably. Yeah. I'm no dummy. I want to go after those big gifts, and I want that generosity. So I'm not saying that needs to go away, but the over reliance, over dependence on that type of giving is a liability for us, right? So the other thing I'm hearing that is a real change is, instead of young people don't give, young people in this case, mostly millennials, some younger Gen Xers, which are now people in their 30s, oldest millennials, like 40 years old now, right? So young is relative, right? But instead of saying young people don't give, which used to be sort of the default that I heard for a long time, now I'm hearing from many organizations, we need a plan. for our donors. We need a plan for younger donors to bring them into the fold and keep them in the fold, going back to that idea of retention. So what we are seeing is that younger people do give, but they give not because there's an inherent intrinsic value in the arts, which is what older generations more so believed than younger generations, but because younger people give to any cause when it aligns with their values, right? That's the shift. That's the narrative that's changing. And within our industry, our own narrative is to say, yes, we see that. We want to embrace that. How do we this goes back to company culture. How do we establish those values and share those values in a way that other people say, yeah, I want to invest in that with my donation? Okay, we're also going to touch on this week 6 with fundraising, decolonizing wealth. Anybody, if you read my year-end book review, I read this book, Decolonizing Wealth by Edgar Villanueva, and it really opened my eyes to philanthropy as a whole, some of the ways that it's really problematic the way we do fundraising. And that book was so helpful in terms of what works, what should change, what shouldn't change. And so we're going to touch on that as well in week 6, and how do we get away from a white savior approach and some of these other things that really are moving into the forefront of the conversation. So that's week 6, fundraising. I've got a great guest that week lined up too. So anybody who wants to raise more money, I'll see you that week. Number 7 of 9 trends where the narrative is changing for the better for our industry. Content, marketing, and streaming. All of those things are week 7. We will be talking about becoming a media company, how that is said all the time. So many organizations now say we've pivoted, we've become a media company, and some organizations really have become more of a media company than others. But again, the conversation has changed. The direction is definitely, we're not going backwards, that's for sure. We're finally moving forward and continuing to move forward over these last 2 years now in terms of this idea of streaming virtual content, digital content, and how that's synonymous with marketing. We are going to be talking about, can we monetize this? This is probably among the top questions, maybe even the number one question I've been asked over the pandemic. Aubrey, how do we monetize our streaming efforts? Spoiler, I don't think it's really where we make money. I think it's part of an engagement strategy, but we'll get into it in week 7. And we're also going to talk more about content marketing. That's what this is right now. It's content. This whole thing I said at the top was part of the LinkedIn Creator Accelerator program, specifically to bring content, bring valuable content. So how do we apply these principles to our organization? How do we center our audience with our content so that what we're producing is serving them? It goes right back to this idea of audience at the center, customer at the center. And how do we make our content educational, interesting? We'll talk about it. We'll break down content marketing and really get into it. And I'll just summarize this part by saying content lifts, elevates, and extends our brand. And that is why it is so important to the work we're doing. So all of that is week 7, content, marketing, and streaming. Week 8, trend number 8 of 9, changing for the better, alternate revenue streams. So you just heard me say, I don't think streaming is the way we're going to make a ton of money. And I will explain that more in week 7. So that doesn't mean, though, that I think we can't make more money through different means than what we're currently seeing. Currently, it's basically ticket sales and donations, right? For the most part, endowment a little bit, maybe, opera companies can rent out sets and costumes and things like that as a smaller revenue stream. But really, those are kind of our main categories for the most part of revenue. We're going to talk in week 8 about a couple different ways where I do see money on the table. One of those ways to highlight it now is adult education. There is so much to say here, and this really intersects the disruption in higher ed that's happening right now. So as we know, higher ed, as it had to pivot also to online virtual content, really disrupted the model. And there was already an increase in adult education opportunities outside of a traditional college or university, outside of a traditional continuing education structure. That trend was already in place pre-pandemic. Pandemic completely accelerated that. And so this disruption that's happening in that industry creates an opportunity for us to insert ourselves to monetize. So anybody who took my comeback planning sprint in early 2021, probably Q1 of 21 is when I offered that, or read my Flywheel blog post. It's the most read blog post of the last 2 years. I talk about this a little bit in both of those places, this idea that that adult education, there's a lot of ways that can play out, and that there really is some money on the table there for us. Okay. We're also that week going to talk about some case studies of organizations who have effectively done this. So this is not just me pontificating. There are definitely examples of artists and organizations who have employed this strategy and have made bank doing it. So if you like making money, I'll see you on week 8. One more thing we're going to talk about on week 8 is NFTs. I have been so interested in this idea of NFTs. Why? Because the old way of distributing media, of distributing recordings, has been disrupted for the entire music industry, not just classical music, but the entire industry. And I don't know if NFTs, crypto, I don't know if that is the end-all be-all solution. That's not what I'm here to say. I am, though, about iteration, testing, vetting, exploring new opportunities, and seeing, is there something there? So the more I've learned about NFTs, the more I've seen, and there are some case studies already in the performing arts that bear this out, the more I see that there is money on the table. And I hear from my musician friends all the time, my major symphony orchestras, my streaming check at the end of the year, my media check at the end of the year is, $200 or whatever. And so that's not paying the bills. So I'm just so interested that there could be a different way, or at least a short-term, better way to make some more money and get that back in the pockets of everybody on stage and off. So we're going to hit NFTs a little bit and sort of unpack it and just look at, could this be more lucrative for all of us? Even if it's a fad and it's short-lived. Okay, 9 out of 9. The number 9 trend that we are going to end this series with is organizational structure. And I don't know if you hear me say that and you think, wow, that's kind of dry. Why are you ending on that, Aubrey? But to me, I think it's one of the things that needs to change the most, probably. And this is definitely for the arts administrators, a very sort of maybe under the hood conversation, but not only is it one of the things I think needs to change the most, I think it's one of the things that has changed the least. And that same poll I mentioned before that I put out on LinkedIn a week ago or so, organizational structure got the least number of votes. Only 6% of respondents said that organizational structure has progressed, and they are not wrong. So the short version in all of this is that our current organizational structure was developed about 50 years ago in the 1970s. And that's the structure of, we have a development department, we have a marketing department, we have an education department, we have operations, production, right? All of these different teams, silos that we see now, again, 50 years later to this day. And our world, as we know, in the last 50 years has changed so much, and the work before us has really changed. And the whole point of this is how much it's changing before our eyes. So it's changed so considerably that our organizational chart, org structure, really needs to change too, because it's just not serving the work we're doing as best as it could. So this has been just a growing area of interest for me. And we are starting to see this in terms of a conversation that's changing, a narrative that's changing for the better in our industry. We're starting to see it. And a few years ago, very few people were talking about org structure. Now we're seeing different job roles, different titles. So we're just seeing the beginnings of what this could look like. And I've got an awesome guest planned for this final week of the series who's going to talk about this with us, who really understands org design. And we're going to get into it. And strategy can determine our org design. So there you have it. 9 trends changing for the better for our industry. And the good news in all of this is that, one more time, the narrative is changing. It is changing. And even though we're in the midst of so much uncertainty still and unknowns, out of that is coming so much change that is going to serve our industry going forward. So as we wrap up, I just want to say a few things. First, thank you. Thank you for watching, whether you are watching live right now or you are watching online later. I'm so glad to do this with you. I'm so grateful that this is of interest to you. And if you like what you heard or you learned something, please leave a comment, leave a like. Please follow me if you're not already. If this somehow came into your feed and you don't follow me, but you like what you're hearing, please give me a follow. This makes sure that you hear about each of these LinkedIn Live events these upcoming weeks. It makes sure that all the other content I put out there on pretty much these topics is usually what I'm talking about. If you like it and you want it in your feed, again, give me a follow. Share this with others if you would. Again, if you feel like others in your network would benefit from these topics, this series over the next coming weeks, please give it a share, help spread the word. That would be really amazing. And highlight for next week, preview for next week, we are covering the customer experience. I said it up top, I'll say it again. I am bringing in Ruth Hart, who is at the Harvard Clayton Christensen Institute, and is going to talk to us about jobs to be done theory, which is a really great framework for looking at customer experience that I've become super fascinated with over the last few months. And so look for that in your feed. One more time, thanks again to everybody for watching. I am just so excited to be doing this with you, to be bringing you more information, content, value in the coming weeks. And I'll see you again soon. Bye, everybody.